Hello and welcome to a new series. Now, for those of you that have been watching the channel for a very long time, you might recall that I started the YouTube channel back in 2006, 2007 I think it was, with the very first videos being to help explain to fellow pilots in the forums how you set up things like a helicopter. So it seems very fitting that we are going to come full circle in spring of 2022 and revisit what a modern helicopter is, how you set it up, the tips and tricks for things like setting things on your radio up. This was the very first part of the hobby that really grabbed me. I'd done fixed wing stuff, other pieces too. It was years before multi-rotors were even a thing. There weren't really flight controllers, just simple gyro stabilization, and I got heavily into the whole helicopter thing. Which is why when multi-rotors came around, going from a helicopter to a multi-rotor seemed so easy because multi-rotors had flight controllers. Now, modern helicopters are very different from the stuff that I was flying back in 2005, 2006, 2007, and in the intervening years. I used to fly a lot of aligned stuff and also had things like belt CPs, if any of you are old enough to remember those. However, modern helicopters, although they share a lot of the basic stuff with those radio control helicopters I was flying back then, are very, very different beasties. Now, I did a video a little while ago, it was for a Patreon actually, talking about what blade tracking was and how it kind of fit in with things like helicopters. And I thought that only about 40 people would watch that and be interested in it, but actually loads of people were. So it's kind of shown me that, you know what, there is interest in modern helicopters, and it's worthwhile we're doing a series and covering a lot of the basics, because I haven't talked about helicopters for probably 10, 12 years on the channel. So let's do some of that. Now, this is an OMP Hobby M2 helicopter. This one has come from Scotia RC, so a big thank you to Steve up there in Scotland, here in the UK, who is a massive OMP Hobby reseller. They sell all the OMP Hobby stuff, all the different helicopters, the kits, the spares, and he also stocked that VTOL, the OMP Hobby VTOL that I looked at in December. So he was the natural person to go to talk about getting in a helicopter to show you what a modern one looks like. Now, if we take a closer look at this M2 helicopter, there are a number of key things that are very different from the helicopters that I remember from last time I was involved in that part of the hobby. Looking at this 400mm M2, there's lots of differences from the model helis that I was flying back in 2007. First thing I've noticed is this is now a direct drive. The prop shaft actually goes directly from the motor up into the head. So there's no big large main gear with a pinion gear on the motor like it used to be. Other thing I've noticed, of course, is that this is a modern heli, so it's fly barless, and the head setup is dramatically less complicated than it used to be, and that's going to help repairs and setup after things like crashes or when the heli's new or when you've just built the thing. It's also got a fly barless all-in-one control unit that drives the 3 mini servos that control the swash plate and also the 2 motors. The main one, of course, that we've just looked at, which is the one that's going to turn the main rotor, and then there's another little one out in the tail that is there to make sure that the helicopter stays pointing in the direction that you're after. I do like the way that they've really thought about how you access the battery. It's a little catch on this. If you pop the catch, then the battery slides forward and the battery itself is velcroed very, very safely onto a little removable shelf. The frame is beautiful with all the alloy pieces. It is a work of art. It's something that helis have always looked like to me. They've always looked like pieces of jewellery with the beautiful carbon fibre, the CNC machined pieces. Helicopters are like flying Swiss watches. Once I heard somebody describe a helicopter as a collection of parts that's flying in close formation. There's a lot less parts in a modern heli, and that's only good news for repairing and keeping the things in flying condition. Another thing to mention is the boom itself. The boom is actually teardrop shaped, so rather than the tubes that I used to use back in the day, this is quite a nice idea. It means that the airflow over the tail is a lot less messy. And then we have the tail rotor out at the back. Now normally the way it works is that this tail rotor, because it's a fixed pitch, and in the old days my helicopters used to have variable pitch blades at the back, this can speed up and pull the tail to the right, but in terms of yawing to the left, it basically has to slow down this rotor at the back and rely on the torque of the main motor to swing it round. Now, OMP Hobby have done something a bit wacky here. They've got something called TALI, torque assisted left yaw, and that helps with potentially slower left hand yaw moves. When you go to the left, it'll actually speed the motor up, and that's what expected. Now, because I have a modern helicopter now, I can do a lot more of the modern videos and explain and answer lots of questions that you may have. And lots of pilots have looked at these as quite exotic animals, and they kind of are, but they're a lot less exotic than they used to be. Massive thank you to Steve at Scotia RC again for supplying this, and particularly for making sure that I got my hands on one with an orange canopy and with all the orange flash detail. As those of you that watch the channel know that black, grey and orange are kind of my preferred flying colours. Now I've got this thing, I can do videos on how a modern swash plate works, what a flybarless controller is, go through common heli terms like head speed, pitch, throttle, gain, idle up, normal mode, talk about how to set the radio up to work with this. This is a bind and fly model, and the radio setup isn't simple because the throttle on a model like this actually does two things, not one. It adjusts the speed of the head, but also the pitch of the blades, because they're changeable too by changing the height of the swash plate. Things like why you shouldn't use trims in a flybarless heli, and then just general stuff as well. So there's an awful lot coming. So if you can think of something that needs a modern video on a modern helicopter to explain to new pilots how that particular thing works, then pop it in the comments down below. Stay tuned, there's going to be lots more radio control heli stuff, because I also want to put FPV on this. I think it will be a lovely modern helicopter to do that on, to kind of put some of the modern FPV stuff that we use in the hobby on this to see how well that would work, but that's probably 5 or 6 videos away. So again, these videos will be aimed at newer pilots. If you are already an accomplished heli pilot, probably not going to learn anything at all from these videos. Although if you're like me and you're a lapsed helicopter pilot and you're coming back in, it might be interesting to see how much has changed. So I'll see you next time for more heli action. Thank you for spending your time today watching that video. You can find me in all the usual places on social media, and if you're trying to learn about a subject, then check out the playlist. All of my videos are organised into easy to follow playlists that if you're trying to learn a topic will take you from the basics right the way through to some pretty advanced stuff.